Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Cast in Steel is the competition where minds meet metal as student teams from across the U.S. take on the challenge of recreating George Washington's sword through design, casting, and rigorous testing. Each week, they are pushed through a grueling qualifying round where creativity, engineering skill, and durability are tested, all while competing for a $25,000 grand prize and the title of Cast in Steel champion. Today, my guest is Robert Monroe, and we're going to talk about the origins of the series, how the storytelling approach came together, and what it reveals about how engineers communicate their work to the world. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Robert.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Excellent. So, first question, Robert, what was the original motivation behind creating Cast and Steel, and what problem were you trying to solve in how people see manufacturing and engineering?
Yeah, let me borrow a story from actually it's my father who actually started the competition. His name's Raymond Monroe. And what he was seeing, he has been in the metal casting industry his entire life. He's turned 72 this year, and so 50 plus years. And what he noticed is as time has gone on, and I'm sure many in your audience are aware, the United States, the main difficulty I think facing us is communicating the importance of manufacturing to the general population. Because if we got to make things if we want to continue being a strong country and continue enjoying all the lovely things around us. We all love our iPhones, we love our guitars and everything. All that's manufactured, and so there's a distance though that has been created by modern society. Most of us, we just sit in front of our computers. We're not seeing the work in progress. We may not even know people who work at a foundry or a factory somewhere. And so he was thinking of some way that we could engage with a general audience. And first actually started thinking, how do you get college students to think about metal casting, metalwork, manufacturing as a possible career path? So that led him to go, okay, what do college students really like? What are they kind of nerding out about? And so he was thinking about the show Forged in Fire and this concept of you're taking something that is kind of archaic, blacksmithing, something a little out of the ordinary, but then you're going, hey, actually, we're making swords. We're making cool things. And then people go, oh, that looks cool. And then you show all of the fun technical elements, but you start with a very simple premise. We're going to make swords and we're going to whack on things. So the first year was in 2019, and he decided, let's do a Viking axe. Probably smart not to start with a sword. I think that would have freaked out a lot of the college professors because, as we'll get to a little bit later on, casting a sword is kind of hard. And so, but we started with a Viking axe, and we had, you know, more than a dozen teams come out for the very first competition, and that just showed the interest of, instead of pitching something mundane or something not very exciting to students, if you say, hey, for your senior design project for engineering, why don't you make something fun? So the first year we did a Viking axe, then we did a Bowie knife, and then after that we did a Celtic sword, and then a hammer, Thor's hammer, so a little bit of fantasy, and then an African spear, and then a Howling bar, and then the what we're talking about today, George Washington's sword, was the object for 2025 and what we filmed. So again, just to kind of circle back and answer your question, the real idea was, how do I take a general audience, for specifically the competition participants, uh, who may have never stepped foot in a metal foundry at all. They may not have ever seen molten metal. They may have never dealt with any of that. and how do I make that interesting and exciting? And it was, okay, start with something that is intrinsically exciting to them, like a sword or an axe. And then through the process of making that, then they learn about all these other exciting things.
Nice. So how did the storytelling idea behind the series come together?
Good question. Basically, that came together because of different connections that started to form as the competition grew in popularity and in prestige in the community. So, metal casting in general is a very important but very small industry, and kind of everybody knows everybody else. And my and basically SFSA, Steel Founders Society, the company that sorry, not the company, the trade association that runs the competition, founded the competition, they were reaching out for more sponsorship, and they ended up talking with IBAS, which is the Industrial Base Assessment, and I cannot remember what the last letter stands for, but they sustainability, that's what it is. IBAS from the Department of Defense, and they're looking all the time for things like this to help shore up the industrial base because metal casting, fabricating facilities, forging facilities, these are all very important for us making submarines, making tanks, all the things that help keep us safe. And so that was kind of the beginning, but they wanted something with a little more broad reach. And what we realized is if instead of taking this top-down approach, hey, this is really important, you're going to make a lot of money, go into manufacturing, good jobs, very important. That message, as much as to you and I might sound really appealing, we were finding it didn't really resonate with younger generations as much as trying to go more a bottom up, hit them with curiosity, hit them with the fact that there's meaning just in just making things, just having an idea and going like, oh, anybody who's messed with 3D printers knows exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like, oh, I could make this little widget for my kid, and then you do that, and that's basically the storytelling aspect. And we're like, we enjoy this a lot. Random people we tell about enjoy it a lot. What if we film the whole thing and then actually put that out there? That's actually kind of what got me involved because in 2023, I started doing the social media posting for all of it. And, you take clips, it's kind of interesting because I grew up around the industry. And so it's not that new, like a new experience to me to see metal being poured. But you throw a random clip of metal being poured on the internet, that thing has a good chance of going viral because there's a lot of people have never seen a big steel furnace and seeing all the metal being poured. And so just having that accessibility to the general audience then drove a lot of visibility. And then that in turn was like, okay, maybe there's something here. Then we got the funding involved and we were able to start telling these stories to a bigger audience.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen liquid metal being poured. So yeah, I think maybe that's something I'm going to look for once we finish our interview for
It,
sure.
it I would recommend to anybody who's interested, first just look up, steel foundries and like, steel pours. Aluminum pours are cool, but nowhere near as cool as steel. And then after that, if you really want an experience, see if you can actually go visit. A lot of foundries, they want people to know about them. And so if you go visit, you're either going to have one of two reactions. This is really, really hot and I want to leave immediately, or this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Because it's about as close as you can get to standing next to the sun on the earth, being that close to a large steel pour.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I'm curious to find out what communication challenges would you have seen the student teams have in explaining their design and their casting choices?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of very specific communication challenges, and then the general ones that you find always with a technical subject explaining it to non-technical things. And we try to facilitate that. But one of the requirements in the competition is you have to make a video and a paper about your project. And I think that's a good, useful challenge because that helps refine what they're trying to say. And the judges come from a variety of different backgrounds, and so they can't just be targeting, say their college professor. But what I would say is specific to metal casting and this competition, I would say one of the biggest ones is, for example, like a subject like metallurgy. So, metallurgy, the properties of your sword, your axe, whatever, a lot of that's going to be defined about what, different metals all come together in your recipe to make your alloy. And they use a lot of words like ductility and like tensile strength and like all these things that honestly I don't come from that background, so they go right over my head. And one of the things that I felt like is my role is I go, can you explain that to me again, like, and use different words that people typically use? So like understanding, there's a balancing act. You can't get anything for free. If you make something that's really, really rigid, it's not going to bend at all, chances are it's going to break then if you put a lot of force to it. If you instead make it so that it's not so brittle that it breaks, it might bend. And if you go ahead and watch the show, that's now the first episode's on YouTube, you will see failures of both of those types of swords that were either heat treated or the alloy choice was not quite correct in one of those directions. And so it is very much trying to figure out, how do I take these technical words that exist for a good reason and allow me to get in a very heavy, like high end space on this so I can really know what I'm doing. But how do I actually go back to first principles and use just basic English words so we actually know what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's a big issue for a lot of technical people. And when it comes down to it, we weren't always experts in what we're experts in. So at one point, you didn't know what ductility meant. You didn't know what tensile strength meant. But now you use these words willy-nilly and just expect people, a general audience, to understand these words. But we need to have that empathy to understand that, well, at some point, we didn't know these words too. So what could we have understood back when we were that person that couldn't have understood those words? And that's the person you're likely speaking to.
That's a great point. I love that idea of putting yourself in the shoes of starting over and learning it from the first time. I think that's a great way of explaining it. I think the other thing that this competition has really highlighted, and I think is very, very important, is I think gone are the days that you can just be entirely 100% technical and just stay over there and never work on communication skills and work on reaching out to non-technical people. I think the beautiful thing about social media in the modern world is it puts us in the situation where we're going to have these connections, and that's going to be very strong. But it also challenges all of us. We all have to step out of our comfort zone and be willing to communicate, and that's a huge part about what the show is about.
Yeah, and I worked in medical devices for a number of years, and I had to work in teams, and there was a number of people on the team that weren't technical. So certainly, if I was using a whole bunch of jargon they didn't understand, well, that's likely going to slow down the project. And then I think another thing that people lose sight of is, if you're an individual contributor and you want to move into management, well, a big part of management is being able to communicate with others, and it's not just communicating with your team; it's communicating what your team is doing to people above you, and a lot of those people aren't technical either. So you could think that just being technical is what you're going to be for your entire career, but you'll find yourself being pigeonholed and not being eligible or being seen as useful for certain opportunities, and then you're going to be disgruntled sitting in your cubicle.
Yes. Well, and I mean, and even if you stay over on the technical side, to get approval to do the cool, super nerdy technical thing that you want to do, a lot of times you're pitching it to somebody who doesn't have the technical capabilities you do. So, no, the communication's a really key piece, and that's one of the reasons why we do ask them to write a paper and do the video. So actually, what I personally judge in the competition is the video side. And what is fascinating to me is the such a high level of understanding of the different things that they lose again that fact of like, hey, there's a human being on the other side. They may not know all the words you're using. Can you figure out a way to communicate this? Because you have a technical paper. So if you want to get in the weeds, that's where you can get in the weeds. but video and like we're having right now, a conversation is such a great way of making it more accessible.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious about even the team. So how many people were on a team and how were the teams selected?
Yeah, so there were 38 teams total for 2025, and the team size is kind of soft capped at five. But in reality, we had for 2025, we had teams all the way down to two people. And then there were some teams where, in an unofficial capacity, they probably had eight people in general working. And as I'm sure you well know, there's advantages and disadvantages to both. If you watch the footage of the team with two people, they always knew exactly which who was doing what, and they had that very tight structure. But at the same time, it's a lot of work because you're when you're talking about casting a sword, you're going to need to first of all do some historical research because you're making a replica. So you're going to need to look into what George Washington's sword looked like. You're going to also need to do some research into best practices, and then you're going to need to model. So you're going to have some degree of 3D modeling experience to be able to model it accurately so that you kind of have an idea. You're going to need to simulate. So you're going to have to take that 3D model and then whatever casting process you're doing, there's all this software to be able to simulate that process. You're going to need to be able, to actually make the mold, figure out what alloy you're going to use, all these different steps. And so the teams, I think a lot of the successful teams, you can watch their videos and you can realize that early on in the process, they figured out how to communicate and how to work together and figure out who was going to do what, and kind of work to their strengths. What fascinated me, again, being a less technical person in my background, is how many teams had somebody who was a dedicated person who actually was not even from the engineering or the STEM side of the school. But they had an expertise in communication, or they had an expertise in video production, or in writing, or in history, and that can really be the glue that kind of helps the whole project hold together and get where they need to be.
Yeah. I started Teach the Geek, Robert, as well, it was based on my own struggles working as an engineer and having to give presentations in front of others. And when you were talking about the person that perhaps wasn't even from the engineering side, but they had this skill in communicating. My whole goal with Teach the Geek is to help technical people like engineers not need that translator because
Yes.
it all started with just myself and not being all that great at communicating, and but then eventually seeing the usefulness in just me being a better communicator. But then it gets reinforced in various times. So a couple of years ago, I went to a conference, a technical conference, and there was a business development person giving a presentation on behalf of his company. And it was mostly engineers in the audience. And afterwards, he didn't get any business questions. They were all technical questions. And he couldn't answer any of them. But
Wow.
luckily, there were two engineers from his company in the audience, and they answered all the questions from their
That's
seats.
awesome.
But then it got me thinking, why didn't one of them give the presentation?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because it's mostly engineers in the audience. They're likely going to have technical questions, and here this poor business development person being put in front of them because they likely have the communication skills, but they don't have the knowledge to answer those questions. And yet, here these two perfectly good engineers seated next to me in the audience, and
Yep.
they answering questions. So really, with Teach the Geek, the goal is to help us technical people not need the translators and be our own translator.
If you don't mind me, hijacking the interview for a second, I would be curious to know what would be your advice to all of these student teams on that communication. Again, a lot of them are early on in their engineering career, and they're so excited about all the technical stuff that draws you into engineering and into those fields. But what would you say would be some, best sort of tips or advice, to them?
Don't think that being excellent technically is enough. I think a lot of us
Mm,
we come into the field and thinking this is what we were hired for. We got these degrees from these schools, we take on these technical roles, and that's what we're going to be judged on. And certainly that's the case, but it's also you're going to be judged on what potential do we see in this person 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What do we see them doing? What do they want to be doing? And if what they want to be doing involves communicating with others, which likely it will, even if you're not a manager of people, well, this is something that you should focus on and prioritize early on rather than later. I mean, I mentioned I had to give presentations in front of management and wasn't very good at it. This was a few years into working, and I got the hint eventually. And I got the hint because my project got canceled.
That's one way to get the hit.
Yeah, yeah. This whole, communicating in front of people thing, especially decision makers, maybe there's something I need to improve at. And I just don't want people that are coming into the field just out of school to go through what I went through if they can help it, if they understand right away the usefulness of communicating with others and just being seen as not just that technical expert, but the person that we understand too. It's not just, well, Neil, the engineer said something, it went completely over our head, and we'll just go along with whatever he said anyway, but we don't really understand it. But no, it's he put it
Yeah.
in a way that we understand and we are comfortable moving forward with what he said.
Yeah. No, it's I couldn't agree more. It's as you probably have figured out from all this, my main primary education is in music, and you run into that all the time with music. It does not matter how good you play your instrument if you can't talk to another human being and explain what we're here to do, what chords are you going to play, how you're going to interact. And again, bringing it back to the competition, that I think having it be a team competition, having it uh, incorporate so many different elements, then forces that communication to happen.
Yeah. What do you hope viewers take away from the series in terms of what the students were doing in terms of just engineering and manufacturing and everything else?
What I would say, I would love for two things to happen. I think the first is to see the excitement that is clearly visible in the students when they're talking about all of these things that excite them so much that, again, general engineers get excited about the technical aspects, all of that. And the visceral aspect and just the meaning that comes from engineering a better world and engineering something that yes, right now it's a sword and it's just a fun project, but those skills are super applicable to making cars safer and all the things that we need around us. The other thing that I would say is just the human aspect, to realize that there's an actual human that designs and has worked on and has manufactured every object around you. And, just to give that bit of information that allows you to approach the world in a little bit more of an informed way, that again can just allow you to interact and understand that everything around your door handles, your doors, your house, everything is made, and somebody had to make it. Even if it was automation, somebody had to program the robot to make it.
Yeah. And one other thing I was just thinking about with people getting from the series is if you're a younger person and you've heard about engineering, but you're not exactly sure what it entails, or what you think it entails is a bunch of math, a bunch of science, a bunch of doing things on a computer, and it certainly can include all those things. But when you see the application of
Yes.
that math and that science and doing things on a computer, you built a sword. That, that
Yeah.
that's that's pretty cool. And
Yes.
so
To piggyback off what you're saying, it reminded me of one of the interviews. I can't remember. I think it's in maybe the third episode. There's this student, and I can't remember their name, but they were getting interviewed, and they were like, one of the big misunderstandings is as an engineer, everyone thinks if you're an engineer, that means that you're just really, really smart. It's like you can just be into this stuff a lot and just really enjoy it and stick with it, and you'll figure it out. And I thought that was just such a nice disarming way because again, I do agree. It's like this idea of like, is this really for me? And it's like, do you like making stuff? Do you like making swords? Like, there and it's so much more than the surface way that we think about it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Robert. It makes it way more approachable, and I'm really glad that that student said that because you're absolutely right. Engineering can be very intimidating to
Yep.
a lot of people, and and you even go to one of these schools and get through an engineering curriculum might be difficult. But then if you see the other side when once you're past it, and then you get to build these cool things, and maybe even discover things about yourself that you didn't even know beforehand. Engineering, and not only that, but engineering is way more versatile than people give it credit for. I
Yes.
mean, I worked in medical devices, but I mean in product development, but there are engineers doing all kinds of jobs. They work in sales, they work in marketing, they work in, regulatory and quality and just all over the place. It's it's something I certainly am glad that I did. Yeah, 100%. This has been a great interview. This has been a great conversation, Robert. Thank you so much for being a guest. For people who want to check out the series, how can they do it?
Yeah, you could either go to castandsteel.net, that's our website, and there's all the links to everything there. The cool thing about that, you can even, if you're looking for ways of getting more education about metalwork in general, and then also just the industry, there's also some links to different programs there. But also, if you just pop over to YouTube and find the Cast and Steel YouTube channel, the first episode's up. Episode 2 is coming out this Thursday. And then we'll just continue that weekly cadence. But in the meantime, there's a ton of different shorts. If you like swords, if you like metal, if you like, sparks flying, excitement, it's all there.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.